So this is a meet and greet of me, Cristo Bowers, and when we move into the question and answer session, or portion of the session, uh, when you type questions and I take them, I will go ahead and say the question out loud. That way everyone knows what question I am addressing. Now, I think that from looking at the list, most of you have seen me lecture, you've seen me teach in one venue or another. And so you might have received some form of the webinar that I'm about to deliver. But if you have questions that you'd like to ask that would help you understand more clearly what I'm able to do or how I'm able to do it, feel free to ask those questions, and I will answer them honestly and hopefully clearly. Now, in 1992, I actually had my first spiritual experience, which was an out-of-body experience. Now, I don't mention this in my lectures very often because I feel like it can take the lecture into a whole new space that is really difficult to move out of. But at the time, to give you a little bit of the surrounding history, I was actually working a lot, probably up to 60 to 70 hours a week. And one evening I came home from second shift exhausted and fell asleep. Now, when I fell asleep, I actually, as many people who have out-of-body experiences, woke up in this incredible expanse of blackness. It was not really what I would call terrifying, but it was an experience where I realized that I was clearly awake. I could clearly reason or had my faculties about me, and I could sort of look around, but I couldn't move. Now, this experience lasted maybe only 5 or 10 minutes, but it was an experience that would really mold and shape the rest of my life. Now, from that point in time, I actually went to the library and I began to read every book I could read on spirituality, religion, and at that time I was introduced to a lot of theosophical literature, which I can still highly recommend for its clarity and value. Now, everything that I had read at that point in time indicated that if I wanted to develop spiritually, which I had an interest in, that I would have to meditate. Now, that didn't seem like very much fun to a 16, 17-year-old. There were more important things to do in the world, like driving cars and going out to the river at night, but we won't talk about those experiences. So, but it did put me on a path of spiritual study. I began to read all the books I could find, and ultimately, in 1996, 97, I began to actually practice meditation. Now, if you have a meditation practice, I think that you can also appreciate the difficulty that's inherent in self-teaching. Because a lot of the literature indicates that you should sit in meditation and quiet or still your mind, which is exactly what I tried to do and which I also found was nearly an impossible task. So meditation practice, actually, I will tell people who come to my lectures and classes that it was one of the most difficult and impossible things that I have ever done. But I also persisted in the practice and eventually learned how to meditate properly. That was back in 1996 to 98. And, during this time, I would say that apart from my spiritual study of theosophical literature and some other books that I would stumble across, there were really no major experiences spiritually. Just a normal life of going to school, reading books, and working on my degrees. Now, in 2004, I began to desire to teach meditation, which I had practiced at that point from 98 to 2007, which is approximately 9 years. And so I had a small group of people. I would teach a free meditation class on Thursday evenings. And if I was lucky, maybe 2 to 3 people would show up a week. Oftentimes I would sit there alone, at least hold the space for those people who were intending to show up. Now, during this period of time, for the 2 or 3 people who would show up, I would sit with them and meditate. And, well, this was the 2004, which I was actually teaching a meditation class that was an 8-week course. Now, so I had maybe 8 people who signed up for this 8-week course, and we would sit together, and I would lead them in meditation. Now, this was probably the place where I had my second major spiritual experience, and that is I began to have glimpses of energy. Now, in this particular space, and I can give you a couple examples, so I would lead everybody in meditation, we would sit and meditate, and having closed my eyes, I could see, in certain cases, lines of energy actually connecting us, usually at the navel, what I would now indicate as the navel chakra. But I would see these lines of energy connecting us, and then afterwards, I encourage people just to share what they saw in meditation if they had any experiences. People would oftentimes say that, I saw lines of energy connecting us here in the abdominal area. Or I had another insight that it seemed to be a shared experience. Now, my next biggest spiritual experience in this space was I was sitting in meditation, closed my eyes, I was leading this group, and I actually saw a spirit being appear in the center of the room and literally walk around the space. Apparently spirits can't float, they actually walk. And they would walk around the space, and this person touched everybody on top of the head in a form of blessing. And I'm not one to readily volunteer seeing such things because, it can lead into dialogues that are really difficult to generate conflict. But I saw it clearly. And as we shared in the group, there was one woman particularly who was sort of reticent to share. Normally she would share her thoughts and experiences, but she would, very good. Is anybody else having video difficulty? If so, feel free to indicate that at any point in time. Kelly? Anybody else having difficulty? So we have 2 people. Okay. If anybody else is, okay. No. Okay. Great. So most everybody seems to be having a decent time to access. And if you might want to try logging out of the space and logging back in. So as I got back to this woman who was having some difficulty sharing, after we completed the circle, I would talk with students privately. And I asked her, I said, well, you seemed like you were hesitant to share, but that you might have had an experience of something. And she said, well, this might sound kind of crazy, but as we were sitting in the circle, I saw a being appear in the middle of the circle and walk around the circle and touch everybody on top of their heads. That's true. I can also send the session out after and give everybody access to it if there's anything that you missed. So there was quite an affirmation for me to be able to see this, to have this shared experience with another person who really saw the same thing that I did. Now, from that point in time, that was 2004, I was still pursuing my meditation practice. I stopped teaching meditation for the time because my studies at U of M began to be overwhelming. So I went into my own private practice and moved out of my public teaching for the time being. Now, in 2007, I actually decided to teach again. And it was, I approached this little body, mind, spirit wellness center in Ann Arbor, and asked them if they would mind me offering a free public meditation class. And they were interested, and so we went ahead with it. Now, this is a meditation class where I would teach every Thursday, and I would have a few people show up periodically, and not very many people regularly. With the individuals who did show up and who did sit in meditation with me, just sitting in silence with them for 5, 10, maybe sometimes 15 minutes, I actually began to know very clear and very precise information about them. And this information would range from anything from sexual dysfunction to a history of sexual assault to heart disorders, cardiac dysfunction, loss of loved ones. It was highly specific information, and I was compelled to share it with the people who attended. So for those individuals who showed up and they sat with me, I would ask them at the close of the meditation session if they would mind if I shared information with them. And most often they were very open, and I would share with them what I saw. Most of the time they would be very surprised at what they saw, what they heard, and they would feel very overwhelmed with material and its accuracy. And they would oftentimes ask me how I knew it, and at that time I couldn't tell them. I just knew the information, and I had no basis of really understanding how I was able to receive it. Now, at this time, I was conducting all of my public engagements for free, and so people at that time, they would tell their friends of friends, their family members, and I had a lot of people who were directed to me, particularly by the phone. So I was doing a lot of distance reading for people. I began to sit at home. People would call me, tell me that they heard that I could help them. And so I began to actually take time to engage these people over the telephone, and I would share with them what I saw. Now, this process took us probably up to 2008 to early 2009, where I was doing, again, a lot of distance work with people. I would basically take the person's name, their phone number, and I would meditate on them for an hour, write down or journal information about them for another hour, and then I would call them back the following day and I would share what I saw with them. And again, this continued to grow and proliferate until my first next major spiritual expansion was where I actually began to see, at least pretty clearly, the 8th and ninth chakras simultaneously. Now, for me, I actually began to see a ball of energy above my own head, a little, well, it wasn't so little, it was actually about the size of a softball. It was a glowing orange sphere of light, and above that was a white sphere of light. Now, I recognize these as chakras just because they have that appearance, like you see somewhat in books where there's a ball of energy and it rotates. So I began to see the 8th and ninth chakras pretty consistently, and this is the first time that I began to see and be able to hold an image of energy. Now, between the 8th and ninth chakras, there was also a stream of energy that literally looks like a waterfall from the ninth into the 8th, which is where I locate a person's primary archetype, and we can talk a little bit more about those when we move into the Q&A portion. So at this point in time, I had no real understanding of the 8th or ninth chakras, and in fact, in any of the books that I've ever read, no one had ever presented the idea of them to me. So I began to look online, and there wasn't really any information that seemed to be valid. It was turned up dead ends. So I had a couple of friends who were also psychic or clairvoyant, and I asked them, and they're like, well, that's the 8th and ninth chakra, but they couldn't really tell me anything more about it. At that point in time, I was doing a lot of driving between the Ann Arbor, Detroit area, and I had a lot of clients that I was seeing, and I was actually driving out to meet them. So, as a matter of fact, some of you here are actually people who I visited at their place where they live. Now, I don't do that so much anymore because there are too many of you. And if I drive out to meet everybody, I unfortunately wouldn't have any time to sleep. So, as I was driving into Detroit one day, I was listening to a program on tape, audio cassette by Carolyn Mace, and I believe the series that I was listening to was the Advanced Energy Anatomy. Now, there's Advanced Energy Anatomy, and then there's the Energy Anatomy series, which I can both still highly recommend today. Now, as I was driving, all of a sudden I hear Kaylin Mace mention the eighth chakra, and that's where she sees archetypal energies. And at that point, I almost drive off from the road because this is the first time I hear anybody intelligently speak about the eighth chakra. And at that point in time, I did have some limited familiarity with being able to move into the space of a chakra to get information. I thought, well, if Carolyn Mace can do it, I can do it too. So from that point forward, I began to engage the people that I sat with, and I would go into their eighth chakra. I'd move into that space psychically, and I would begin to pull the archetypal energies that they were working with. Now, this was actually a really amazing time in my life because I began to see with extreme clarity what I'm going to call now the building blocks of personality. That these archetypes located in the eighth chakras and in the ninth chakra at this point in time are literally the foundational aspects of the people that we understand as friends, relatives, any other person that you see in physical, well, any other divine being that you see in physical form. It is literally an expression of a series of archetypal energies. Now, at this point in time, even though I was so new to the space of being able to engage people at this level, that I didn't believe the information that I was seeing. I was still at that point in my career where I doubted what I saw. Um, but I can give you a couple examples, and for those of you who've heard these, it still strikes me every time I remember what it was like to see these energies and to have a person respond. One of the first archetypal energies that I pulled out of a woman's eighth chakra was the archetype of the swimmer who's swimming, almost drowned, and is pulled out of the water. Let me ask this. Does everybody have a clear idea of what an archetypal energy is at this point? If you don't, I'm giving you an opportunity to ask so that way you have clarity as we move forward. Okay. So no, I don't. That's what I've heard from a couple people. An archetypal energy is literally as I see it, it's a minute energy that defines or limits a person's expression. And let me tell you what I mean by this. The example that's been coming into my mind recently is that of a leaf cutter ant. You know, the leaf cutter ant is a certain physical form that has associated with it a particular archetype of the one who cuts and carries a leaf, right? So this is an archetypal energy, the one who cuts and carries a leaf and does a certain thing with it. Another example of an archetypal energy would be that of, I've seen so many, um, like the healer archetype, the goddess archetype, the mother archetype. It becomes a pattern in consciousness, which really becomes an instinctual or compulsion that the person must perform. So, for instance, there was a woman I had met at this time who had the archetype of the swimmer who's swimming and almost drowns but is pulled out of the water. This was what I call a cold read, where a person comes in, sits down, I look at them, and I begin to access their eighth chakra and just write down madly what I see. And again, one of the first archetypes that come back is exactly this one. And I look at this and I'm thinking to myself, what does this really mean? So I asked her, well, this is what I'm seeing. It's the archetype of the swimmer who's swimming almost drowns but is pulled out of the water. Does this have any meaning to you? And she said, yes, it does. Actually, I've had 3 near-drowning experiences. Now, this woman was about 60 years old, I think, and had 3 near-drowning experiences of her life. And I began to see the connection between archetypal energies and how those energies express through a person and cause a person to experience certain scenes or certain engagements with reality. Now, there was another woman that I saw at this time. It was actually in the same space, time probably within a week. She had the archetypal energy in her eighth chakra of the one who likes to jump rope. Now, this woman, again, this is a different woman of approximately, I would say, 60 years old. And, again, when I see this energy, I'm plucking this out of her eighth chakra, and there was nothing really about her that seemed to indicate a regular exercise routine. She was dressed normally. And as soon as I said this, she started smiling and beaming. She said, "I love jumping rope. It's my favorite thing to do. I have a jump rope in my car right now that I have carried with me for the last 15 years of my life." Now, again, seeing these archetypal energies and hearing people's stories around them, I began to really understand, again, the building blocks of personalities, which I call or define as archetypal energies. Does that help bring some clarity to those individuals out there who did not have a good understanding of what an archetype was? Okay, good. So the human being, between the eighth and ninth chakras, in the eighth chakra, as I understand it, from this point in my life, there are approximately 12 there. I'm going to generally agree with Carolyn Mace because, frankly, I fear her and wouldn't want to disagree with her. So in the eighth chakra, there are approximately 7 to 12 archetypal energies that I see. In the ninth, I find that there are about 20, and they're also what I call idiosyncratic. So I began to explore those spaces. Now, as I began to do this for, I would say, 6, 7, 8 months, another expansion occurred where I began to see, or had my first experience of seeing, a belief that was formed out of the material of a person's mental, emotional body. Now, I had met with a person who had literally, as I was reading for her, I had the experience of seeing something new. And it looked like a little cloud of energy floating around her. And it was about the size of a softball. It was grayish and looked kind of dense, like a piece of fog. Now, at this point, moving inside of an energy seemed really easy, so I'm like, well, I'll at least explore it psychically. Since I've never seen it before, I'll see if it has anything to say. Now, when I engaged this little form of energy, this little black cloud, what I heard was, pardon my French for those of you who are sensitive, but I literally heard the phrase, "What the fuck?" And I'm like, So I looked at it, I read the energy, and I told her, well, what I'm hearing when I engage this is, "What the fuck?" And I said, "Do you say this?" And she said, "No, I don't say that." I'm like, well, this is what I'm hearing when I engage it. Now, this woman called me back about a week later after a session had ended. And she told me, I have to tell you that I was wrong. She said that after you mentioned it to me, I caught myself saying that every day. Maybe 5 to 10 times I would say this phrase. And so shortly after that, we had our second session together, a follow-up, where as we sat down together, I saw another cloud of energy in her field. And this time what I heard when I engaged it is, "This is my life." Now, at this point in time, I was actually reading for her and one of her friends simultaneously, and her friend started laughing. She said, "Just before you got here," she actually said that very phrase to me. She said, "This is my life. What am I going to do?" And from that point forward, I began to engage these little dark clouds of energy in everybody's field, and I called them beliefs, and that's what they are. Now, so I began, again, seeing the 8th, ninth chakras, moved into seeing these little black clouds of energy, which I define as beliefs. Now, I also, after a while of engaging these, began to see these little gold clouds of energy, or these golden vortices of light, and in people's fields. And these are what I now define as positive belief systems. But my first experience without ever seeing one was with a woman who sat down with me. And again, these are all cold readings. I begin by looking through her field, and I see this vortice of light, and this is the first time that I've ever seen it. So I move into it psychically and begin to explore it, and what I hear is, "I know I can do anything, or I feel or I know I can do anything. And so I tell her, and she starts laughing. It's almost a hysterical laughter, and I'm thinking, it's not really a funny saying. But I waited for her laughter to subside, and I said, why, what's so funny about that phrase? And she said, I feel or I know I can do anything because, and she went into this whole phrase, which she repeated for me a couple times. And she said, this is actually a Louise Hayes quotation that I've been using for 2 years. And at that point, I had this amazing realization of how much a person can mold or shape his or her own psyche by creating affirmations, and that it literally has the power to build in psychic forms or forms into your own consciousness. So I also, when I sat down with people, I'm not only looking at their 8th and ninth chakras, but I've also began to look at the content of any beliefs that they had, positive and negative. And this went on for quite some time before I began to see a person's devotional heart center, which is a little chakra to the left and just above a person's literal heart center. Now, this began to house and express data about a person's life or spiritual purpose. And for those of you who I've read for, you understand the value that this sort of information has. And I can clearly remember as I began to explore these energies, uh, I would have these experiences of people walking up to me saying, my friend actually told me that I should find you and ask you a question. And specifically, there was one time when I was at Renaissance Unity distributing flyers for a lecture that I was having there, and this woman came up to me and she said, by the way, one of our mutual friends told me to find you. And she said, I was told to ask you a question. So I said, well, what do you want to ask me? She said, I don't know what I should ask you. At that point in time, again, I'd been seeing the Devotional Heart Center, which is about here in a person. So I'm like, well, what I've been looking at is a person's devotional heart center, so I'll look at yours, and I'll share with you what I see. So I moved into that space and began to look at her devotional heart center for the image there, and what I saw was the one who ministers unto the sick. And I said, does this resonate with you? And she said, it does. I'm a career nurse, and I find myself more and more these days ministering unto the sick and helping them transition over. Now, for those of you who actually are able to appreciate what it means to understand what your life purpose is. I mean, for her, she proceeded to tell me that she'd been praying to God to know what her life purpose was because she was feeling kind of lost. When you hear something like this, it can create a sense of renewal in your person. Now, so I began to see that information. I began to share it with other people. Which is really what my lectures look like. So when you attend them, you know that I'm also sharing what I'm most able to see from a contemporary state or position. Now, about a year ago, I drove to New York City, yeah, or I flew out there. I can't remember how I got out there. I've flown and I've also driven. So I flew out to New York City and I was teaching a couple classes out there. And I happened to walk by where the World Trade Center was. And it's incredible because literally, and you can ask me questions about this later, but I'll proceed to move on. Literally, where the tower stood, there's a violet pillar of light that stretches up as far as I can see clairvoyantly, and in it there's a sound of it has the sound of like the hierarchy of heaven singing. It's one of the most beautiful things that I've ever heard. Now, at that point in time, having walked through that space and I was teaching a class out there, when I sat out there and I saw the people who gathered around me, I noticed something very unique. And that's when I first saw the chakra under the feet. And it was the first time that I had an experience of color in the human energy field that seemed to stay constant. Now, it is interesting because these colors that people carry under their feet, it's literally a chakra that occupies the ground about 6 to 8 inches under the person's feet. And its colors indicate primary characteristics and also life tasks about that person. So I began to see these colors and I began to share them with people as I had an intuitive understanding of some of them, and I had to do some research on the other ones to figure out the meaning of all the colors. So, I began to share that with people and position it to them, and they began to receive the information. So this was another major expansion of consciousness. It so happened that I've had classes around this and share that information with people, and then I began to see other types of information. For instance, I'm trying to think of what uh, my next opening of consciousness was, and I would say that that has to be being able to look at and to perceive the image content as well as the color content of a person's 10th chakra, which literally is an image of their absolute identity as I'm able to perceive it, who they're intended to be, and also the colors that exist at that level indicate certain soul or ego characteristics or attributes that the person has developed in their time here. Now, this is actually really incredible because the people who have seen me that I've shared these images with oftentimes immediately recognize the absolute truth of the identity that's presented to them. And to give you an example, I was at a lecture where I read for this young woman's 10th chakra. And inside of it, there was an image of her as a divine mother. And literally, as I engaged this energy, she just awakened. And she said, actually, I do. She said, I started this organization to help other people become grounded and to be able to express their talents. And so this woman, probably 22, 23, began she recognized this divine energy and how it resonated with her. And she also told me at that time that she just had a confirmed pregnancy, that she was now pregnant and nurturing this image of divine femininity within her. From here, being able to see pretty clearly the human energy field in these various parts, I also noticed something else, and that is behind people or connected to them is what I now define as a global thought center, where each person, as they incarnate into physical form, they actually incarnate through these thought centers, which represent certain ideas or thoughts located in the divine consciousness. For instance, the same woman that I was just referring to, her global thought center was the one who helps others establish their vibration, their identity. And I can't think of really another energy that seems to be more incredible than that one at this time, where you have somebody who is able to recognize and help a person establish their identity in physical plane reality. So their divinity now is being established in physical plane order or physical plane reality. Which means it's kind of like a gardener who's helping a plant to become established and nurturing it until it's able to take hold itself, and then moving away from that space and moving on to other people who also need help in establishing their identity. I'm trying to think of other things that, oh, well, here's another thing. The colors that I see registering in the 10th chakra of people, I'm now actually able to see those colors mirrored in what I'm going to call the astral or emotional body of those who are present. And it actually conveys a significant meaning because in my understanding of this, these colors expressed at the emotional level, in the emotional body, what we normally call the aura, actually have meaning that's specific to the individual, which basically defines how or why, what attributes or temperament they came into physical plane reality with. And I can give you a couple of examples. There was one woman I read for even today, where she sat down with me, I looked through her energy field, looked through her 10th chakra, found her colors, and I was mapping them how they appear in her physical form. And one of them was yellow, which she had around her head. And when I looked at it, what I saw was the one who believes that we should use ideas for the for the betterment and the improvement of humankind. And as soon as I engaged this energy in her field, she just leapt into this whole uh, expression of this energy, saying that, we have the technology, we have the know-how, we have the expertise at this point, and what we really need to do is get on board and move on point with this and cooperate with the divine plan, so that way humanity can all anchor and express their godhood together. And it's really incredible to be able to see and to connect with these energies in such a clear and definitive way to help people be able to understand their own spiritual gifts, their own talent. And it's been really an incredible journey. And what I really feel like I have learned most throughout my ability to see and engage energy is that I have compassion for people and an understanding of them that I could not have before without actually being able to see these energies work out in a person's life. I've seen archetypal energies at this point, anything from the archetype of the gunner, which is really interesting. I was reading at this fair, and I met this woman who asked me if I could look at her husband archetypally. And so I closed my eyes and looked, and what I saw was literally a guy holding onto this gun, literally like you see in movies in World War II, jets just flying over and shooting. And I'm like, that's not a very nice energy to see, so I'm like, let me look for something else. And I said something else. I didn't actually say that energy. Remember, I was doubting myself at this time. And she said, no, that doesn't sound like my husband. My husband's actually a gunner in the military. And I'm like, wow, that's incredible that there's actually an archetype that defines the occupations that people have. And it's true. I remember another time I was reading for this man who came up to me, and I wanted to share some thoughts with him. And he literally got down on his hands and knees in front of me and he bowed. And for any of you who have ever had anybody get down on their hands and knees in front of you and bow, it's a pretty disconcerting process. And even though am a clairvoyant, I'm like, is this guy joking me? Is he pulling my leg? Why is he getting down on his hands and knees and actually bowing in front of me? So he actually came back to another lecture that I delivered in the area, and at that point in time, I was pulling archetypes, I think, out of the ninth chakra, and I said, well, what I see here is the one who performs heroic deeds. And what's interesting is that it's kind of also a heroic expression of self, to chivalrous. It was heroic and chivalrous deeds. You can see the chivalrous aspect in being able to acknowledge somebody else's divinity, however disconcerting it was to me to be bowed in front of. Now, again, what I've learned is that, people are constituted of these archetypal energies along with beliefs and, certain chakra patterns, front and rear aspects may be opened in different degrees or different orders. And what I've learned is that who the person is, particularly if it's a low expression of self, what I'm going to call a low expression, or if a person is expressing at a dysfunctional level, it is generally not their fault. That is, it's either A, a product of circumstances, or B, it has to do with the particular archetypal energies that they are carrying. And there are, in fact, what I would call shadow archetypes, or archetypes of a nature that are not fun or easy to carry in their fields. So what I've learned, first and foremost, is literally compassion for a person's identity. And the second is, the thing that I've learned is that it's important to be able to encourage those individuals that we come in contact with, because they literally are the unfoldment of our future. So when I engage people these days, what I'm looking for is a combination of their dysfunctions or the obstacles to their divinity, as well as the divinity that seeks expression through their person. Currently, this is a pretty complete summary, I think, of the things that I'm able to see. There is one more thing. Um, what I found recently through using my clairvoyant ability is that if I'm able to ask a question and watch a person's energy field, I'm able to find out where that question resonates in a person's energy field and to retrieve a true and correct answer or belief around the material. For instance, I've taught a couple workshops on finances and material wealth where I will basically go around in a circle and I will tell people what is stopping them from earning money, what's keeping them from earning physical wealth. And the things that have come up as beliefs that people have actually been incredible. And I'll share a couple of these stories with you. There was one woman who asked, she raised her hand, I looked into her energy field, said, okay, what obstacles does this person have to acquiring or amassing physical plane wealth? And literally, she had the belief that money is evil. And so I said to her, well, what I see is that you believe that money is evil, that it's corrupt. And she said, well, actually, I do, and it is. Well, I don't know how many people go out searching for corruption, but normally we avoid those things that we have negative feelings about. And if you have negative feelings about money, it's an unconscious, constant belief that continues to ring in your field and to define your reality. Another instance of this particular question and answer session occurred in the same location where a fellow, raised his hand and said, well, what's keeping me from, earning money? And so I looked into his fields, and what I heard is that uh, money cannot earn happiness, right? And he shook his head a little bit and said, no, that doesn't really resonate with me. And the woman that he had been dating actually started smiling. She said, no, that's not true. He said the very same thing to me when we began dating, that money can't buy happiness. That's what I've learned in my life. And as we talked about it more, he actually started revealing his deep unconscious or preconscious ideas around finances. And he said quite plainly in front of this group, actually what I've learned is that I only need about $150,000 to be happy. He said, what I've learned is that through my career, he said, after earning $150,000, earning above that doesn't bring me any more happiness. Now, he was talking about $150,000, like most people talk about 20 or 30. That it's just sort of casual. Oh yeah, I earn $30,000, or I earn, $150,000. But for him, what he had learned is that putting any more effort into earning anything above that creates a sense of waste, that it doesn't buy happiness, that it actually costs him money. It costs him emotional and mental and physical quality. Now, this is one of the few people that I've met who could literally have millions of dollars, at his disposal because of the energies that he carries. Now, there are also other questions that people present to me, like, I'm really looking for a significant other, and I can't seem to find one. I'm like, well, just hold that thought, and I'll tell you what I see. I see that the reason that you're not in physical relationship is because you clearly don't want anyone to control you. And immediately you can see them engage that belief and speak from it. They're like, you're right. No one's going to control me ever again. I've been in controlling relationships my whole life, and I'm not going to enter in that space. Well, you can see there's what I call a confusion of terms, where you actually believe that one thing is another. And if you believe that all relationships are controlling, who would want to be in one? So, when people, I basically have found that I'm able to engage a person's belief systems and to answer pretty much the questions that are posed to me, like what's going on with my relationship with my significant other? Why are we not seeking satisfaction? What's stopping me from, finding my soulmate? What's keeping me from moving out of state? Basically, if those questions can be asked, there is an answer that appears in the person's energy field that shows up as an obstacle. And those can be clearly seen into. Now, this information is extremely useful because, in fact, what happens is that if you don't see it, you struggle against it. And I can promise you that the unconscious belief is probably the only thing that is constant in your field, where the belief about wanting a mate or wanting to increase your financial well-being is a thought. It's a fleeting thought that appears in and among thoughts of going to the grocery store, getting gas, paying the Comcast bill, paying your cell phone bill, needing to call this person or that person back, and to schedule these appointments and cancel others. That while those thoughts appear and disappear, the one underneath is the one that remains constant, and that's the one that defines your life. So, these things are all things that happen to come up and that I'm able to see. And, it's been an incredible journey that, I really believe that most everybody who is able to, that is a healer or a teacher is also able to do. And so, I also teach classes around learning how to engage and to control your psychic abilities. Again, when I first began to see energy, it wasn't a constant experience. I had fleeting experiences that would just appear spontaneously and then disappear and close up for days, weeks, and months. And it was only after more exertion, more study, more contemplation that they began to appear and to remain constant to my sight. So if you have any questions about this whole process and what it's looked like over time, what the experience is like, feel free to ask, and I'll give you as clear an answer as I can. Any questions out there with that? Oh, there we go. So the question is, do a person's colors or their primary characteristics change over time or with certain experiences? you know, the primary colors that I see in the person's energy field are, it's a really good question, are what I would call the basic substratum or the basic temperament of the person who is in front of me. For instance, everybody has a different emotional temperament. They have different interests in life. And these colors, over a person's lifetime, in my opinion, remain constant. Now, we can cultivate them, or we can begin to suppress them, but suppress their expression. But for the most part, if you're born what I would call a dominant yellow, or a dominant black, or a dominant blue, the tendency is to stay those dominant colors and to cultivate life activity around them. These become sort of compulsions in consciousness, and they literally define how you perceive the world. And they also define, to some extent, well, to a great extent, the exact characteristics that you bring to bear on the world, the vibrational quality that stands as an inherent aspect of your identity. And, I haven't done any long-term studies, but I can tell you that most people that I ask, how long has this resonated with you? Say a person comes to me and I tell them that they're a dominant yellow, that they are a person who has pursued intellectual studies or knowledge their whole life. Oh yeah, that's me from as early as I remember. I wanted to know how things worked, how they uh, how they were composed, what made them work, how they make them better. So most often I find that people recognize these attributes as being literally life qualities of uh, the person. Now, an individual has asked, can I see any of us? And, I would prefer not to do that in this particular lecture, because I feel like it would have to do everybody to be exactly fair, and I'm not really prepared to step into that space at this time, but I'd love to answer any questions that you have. No questions? Oh, can I see you with a webcam? Oh no. What happens is that we've Amber and I have played around with this a little bit, and what's happened is that if I pull any of you up, it creates feedback issues, and it's really difficult to control. So this, as of right now, it's like a one-way view, where I don't have to deal with the feedback issues and the problems that seem to be inherent with that. Now, uh, another individual basically asked me, does this drain you of your energy? That's a good question that people oftentimes ask me. Is it taxing on you? And I can pretty much handle a great number of people. Maybe up to 40 people I can individual read for at a time. We're in a space, and probably some of you have seen me do that. It's um, it's something that I need to definitely practice self-care around. It doesn't bring me to my knees for as long as I'm getting enough rest and taking care of myself in the appropriate ways. But it's nice to be able to take downtime from this type of work and to, not have it be every aspect of my life. So, people ask me, if it's problematic to deal with people's problems, usually every day. And no, it gives me a real sense of accomplishment to see people change. And in my own meditations, what I've heard is that, allow people to come, allow them to show up, allow them, basically receive them, counsel them, and let them go. A person's private life, I can counsel them all day long about it, but I can't be responsible for changing their life for them. So I don't take on or assume responsibility for people, and that keeps my energy intact. Yeah, I'm looking here. You know, the as you can probably see, Amber asked me a question about what do I do besides lecturing and personal consultations, and you know, I like to clean my house and decorate and organize. I love to go outside. Rollerblading is a summer favorite thing to do. Uh, Walking in woods, creating spaces for babies, playing with my daughter, who's 6 years old. So these are some fun things to do. Now, I'm actually teaching a class on learning to see the human energy field or learning to read it. And that's then my next class is Birmingham Unitarian, I think it's July 20th and 21st. I'll confirm that with you. But, a person doesn't have to have full knowledge of the chakras. The truth is that even the knowledge that I have right now, I would say is probably only reasonably a partial knowledge. Because, as we're looking at expanding consciousness, we can begin to have a broader view. Now, I don't really anticipate everybody knowing the things that I do. I mean, this is basically my life. Kind of, honestly, this is my profession. So it's what I'm doing literally 24/7. When I'm not actually engaging clients, usually I'm studying or reading or meditating about this particular topic and how to be able to more clearly express or learn more to be able to teach other people. So you don't have to have full knowledge. That's something that I think can be cultivated, and it's something that I think that most people are capable of doing. So I wouldn't expect you to have full knowledge in that space. Now, I literally teach all kinds of classes on the human energy field. So the question is, what kinds of classes do you teach? Are the classes in person only, or are they online? And so far, this is actually my first real web experience. And people have been telling me for the last 6 months that I should really get online and to basically allow people to participate who would participate, but for the fact that they live 1,200 miles away. They live in California, Washington State, Taiwan. So I am just moving online, and I'm also attempting to, when I teach classes, to have an uh, online participation. So I'm hoping to be able to do that. Now I teach classes really on various aspects of the human energy field, from anything from the chakras themselves to how thought is organized, to the chakra colors under the feet, to various aspects of the human energy field, to shame and even self-esteem, which I see related to various dysfunctions of the human energy field. Now, for instance, I just created on my website, www.cristobowers.com. If you look under webinars, I've just created another webinar on, what is it, on self-esteem, which I think is really going to be one of the best classes that I'm going to teach, and that will be an online class, and I will allow people to participate in, they can be both, online or in person, whatever happens to fit with their schedule. And um, hopefully this answers some of the questions. And here, I'm going to type it in here. So www.cristobowers.com. And if you go there and click on webinars, you'll see that you'll see the description for the self-esteem class. And basically, for all of you who have showed up today, and there have been 12 of you, the lecture would normally be, I think, $20. But if you click on the PayPal link, only for those of you who've shown up, so this is going to be over the next 24 hours, if you want to attend that lecture via the web, you get to come for the discounted rate of $10, which I think is, just to thank you for showing up and listening to me, sharing the space. Any questions around that topic? Okay, somebody was mentioning PayPal and not everyone having it. And you don't really need a PayPal account. You can actually use a credit card and make a payment. So if you click on the link and go to webinars and then click on the Buy Now button, what you'll notice is that it says sign in with your PayPal account, or underneath that, it actually says don't have a PayPal account. If you click on that, you can use a credit card or a debit card and pay. Now, again, we plan on sending out a public notice of this event, so I'm giving you 24 hours to make the discounted purchase to attend the webinar, and then then the link will change to its standard $20. So I think by 7 o'clock, is that what we agreed? And let me see here. I'll try to type them. Let's see. So we've answered the question what classes I teach. Another an inquiry, does your environment around you change your colors? This is actually a really good question, because what happens is this, that the environment that we live in, you could actually say allows certain things to happen, and it basically shames or guilts other things. So it will allow certain things, sanction them, and then it will restrict the expression of other energies. So, it can basically, while it can't change your colors as far as I'm concerned, what it can do is that it can limit how you feel about the expression of those colors. Like you can begin to feel guilty or shameful for pursuing intellectual studies. For instance, if you have a person who's a dominant yellow and they spend a lot of time reading, if their family doesn't have that as an energy trait in their tribal consciousness, they'll look at it as a waste of time. Studying all the time is a waste of time. So the person may begin to feel that they need to suppress that part of themselves to fit into their tribal consciousness. Hopefully that's helpful. Yeah, sometimes, distance is a factor, and, I recognize that. I mean, there are a lot of things that I would like to attend, but, driving out for 12 hours to go to New York City might not be an option. And so, my intention is really to reach out to people and have them be able to participate and be transformed by what I can share. And, in the future, when I'm holding these lectures, I think people will be given the option of choosing to be able to ask me questions. Like if I hold a seminar on the 10th chakra, basically people will also have an option of being able to find out what their 10th chakra image is, or what their dominant colors are. Or if I hold a lecture on the chakra that's located under the feet, that people will be given the option of being able to ask me what those are and what they mean. So that way there will be an option of having that information that you can choose to ask. Another question I have here is, do you see or believe that people often open up to a spiritual path after a trauma in their lives? I remember, not everybody can be shaken awake. But for some people, it certainly creates the awareness of a spiritual aspect of life. For instance, people who have had near-death experiences and they begin to have a recollection of seeing otherworldly things will oftentimes change their belief structures around, God, spirituality, religion, and this is, these sorts of traumas can result in opening up to a spiritual path. What I find is that a lot of people are simply born with the awareness that they are here for some spiritual purpose. And that's pretty significant because these are the individuals who are hardwired to bring transformation into the lives of other people. And just today, there was a woman who came in to see me, and it's incredible the energies that she brought with her were, I would say, in the top 1% of the people that I read for. It's just incredible. I wanted to put a video camera on her and have her talk. That way people can begin to hear her message of transformation. Because, if you don't have a medium to express your identity or your talents or your gifts, what good are they? Even Christ said that what good is a candle if it's placed under a bushel? That a candle is not meant to be placed under a bushel but on a hill for all to see. And I really believe that most people who come into physical plane reality and who realize that they are here to be spiritual and to walk a spiritual path, it's that soul recognition that they are here to bring their light to other people. The webinar that I had mentioned begins on, looks like, Tuesday, May 14th at the same time. And again, I will also do my best to record it. There's a question about being able to see the energy of people that have passed around people you read. I have, one of the things that I have not intentionally developed is the ability to be a medium. I have known a lot of mediums in my life, and I know that there's particular disorders that they tend to suffer from, particularly of a nervous disorder nature. So I have pretty much avoided that for myself. Now, what I have engaged is that people sometimes will have a departed loved one come through very, very clearly with highly specific messages for them. And in those cases, which have only been maybe 2 to 3, I have shared the messages that they've brought through. For instance, I was reading for a woman who uh, had some questions for me, and I said, well, what I'm seeing at this point is a horseshoe. And she started crying immediately. And I said, to me, it feels like this is your grandfather. And once she stopped crying, she said, when my grandfather passed away, I said, to him in spirit form, I said, when I see a horseshoe, I will think of you. And so literally, when I saw her field, I saw the horseshoe, I saw her grandfather, and I relayed a message that he had for her after he had passed. And again, this has only come up maybe 2 or 3 times, and it's not something that I again pursue because of the cost-benefit ratio is, I think, too significant for me. But on occasion, when I do see it, it does. I will honor those people and share their messages. The question of angels or guides, I have a really good story about this. There are two of them, in fact. Um, I was working with a woman, and when I got to her core, so literally I'm engaging her energy field, and all of a sudden I see this masculine white angel holding a sword in front of him. Just the purest white color that I have seen in this earthly realm. And I'm like, wow, that's incredible. And so I haven't seen that before, and I have not seen it since, but only with this woman. And so I said to her, what I'm seeing in your energy field is this huge holding a sword, pointed downward in your core. And I said, does this resonate with you? And she said, actually, let me tell you a story. She said, my mother was diagnosed with cancer several years ago, and she didn't believe in doing Reiki, me doing Reiki or anything like that. But she said that when her mother, after going through the chemo treatments, would basically uh, fall into a state of unconsciousness. And she said during those periods of time, I would work on her energetically. And she said one day I was working on my mother, and she said my mother awoke, looked at me, and was startled. She was shaken. And her mother told her that what I saw was a huge white male angel at the foot of my bed, holding my feet when I regained consciousness, when I awoke. And this is one of my first experiences of an angelic form. And the second one was there's a church called Corinthians Center for Spiritual Healing and Teaching, which is in Jackson, Michigan. And when I've gone there, they have in the front, there are these two angelic figures who stand there, and they're really tall. And I never said anything to anybody. I just watched them sort of suspiciously. What are you guys up to? And they don't move. They just radiate this energy. And so I, again, didn't say anything to anybody, and I was talking with one of my friends. And she was talking to me about going down to Brazil, and I've also been down there to see John of God. And she said that I was walking down there and seeing the different sites, and by the way, there are these, the big white people. And she keeps on talking, and I'm like, wait a second, what do you mean the big white people? She said, the big spirit forms, the like angel-looking entities that walk around that are all down there. And so, there are certainly angelic forms, guides, if you will, beings that are not necessarily embodied in physical form. They are, in fact, among us as helpers, as entities that can provide some forms of support and sometimes healing. For instance, when I've done some forms of energy work with people, uh, I have seen angels or angelic figures and guides come in also and to help support that space. Any other questions or thoughts? Well, I think that this is exciting. The question is, how many energy figures have you seen at one time? I would say up to 10. I mean, it's incredible. I have received some massages from people, and I don't know. I'm sure that other people have had this experience where literally it feels like the person who's massaging you is in 10 to 15 different places at one time. And literally, in those cases, you are being worked on by spirit beings simultaneously to being worked on by the physical being that you're there to see. Has anybody else had that experience? I mean, I've actually seen them when I focus my attention and look. You've also had that experience, yeah. I mean, it's incredible. So, any other questions? So this is the fabulous 10 out there right now, and yeah, I wonder too. Is I think Amber was going to send out a poll asking people, what time of day, webinars seem to be a viable option for you. Does like 7 o'clock work? Do Sundays work? When are good times to be able to access a webinar? And also, what amount of time seems to be a good amount of time to invest via the web to basically have a web attendance? I've heard different things from different people, but it would be good to see, what resonates with your person and your experience. Is it a half an hour? Is it an hour? Is it an hour and a half? What's that? Yeah. Well, it's just a good thing to share because I would like that information if you have time. And if there are any other questions about energy, what that looks like, what the experience has been, a common question that people ask is, do you see things all the time? And, I do, I do not continually engage the world around me. And, I don't really, I'm not on all the time. Like I'm walking around and people are like, are you looking at me? Are you looking? And, I compare being able to see the energy field to basically being able to shift the focus of one's attention or your eyes. You know, the example that I usually use is that if somebody asked you what's on the wall behind you, you're not going to have a reasonable description of what it is, but if you turn around and look, it'll be there and available for you to see. In the same way, I don't walk around looking at people's energy fields all the time. I mean that there's 7 billion people on the planet and only one of me, and I do like to rollerblade on occasion, so it's nice to be able to disengage. So no, I don't keep watching all the time. I only look when I choose to. You know, although on occasion, and it is true, that when I meet somebody, sometimes psychic content will literally jump into my consciousness, so I will know facts about them. It's not common, but it is actually
A vast virus database has been
a
updated.
fact that sometimes, again, when I meet somebody, I will immediately know something about them and I will be encouraged to share it. And when that happens, I'm really good about making a transfer of that information. So Frank has joined us, and he is asking a question about going over my journey as a healer and what happened in 1991 and 2007. And what I'm doing is that, Frank, I've actually recorded this session, and I am going to upload it to YouTube, as long as everything works out okay, and make it available to the public. And if you care to submit your email address to me, I will make sure that I get a copy to you of the link, as well as to another couple people who couldn't join us tonight, and who've also given me their email address to send them the link to the YouTube video. What makes me a good teacher? What's that? Thank you. I'm a good teacher. Um, any other questions or thoughts? Has this been a decent experience? Has the information been useful, helpful? Now, as we continue to engage, these webinars in this space, I want to share this with you, that there's a really big marker board behind me that I intend to use in the future when I'm conducting these webinars to actually illustrate the information that I'm sharing. And I want to let you know that the upcoming webinar on self is actually going to be a really in-depth look at the psychological as well as the emotional and spiritual dysfunctions around self-esteem, and I really do think that this is going to help people really understand where their self-esteem issues lie, as well as the ideas of self-acceptance and self-worth. And I do hope that you're able to join me. And when I send these notices out through Facebook, and if you're not already my Facebook friend, you can friend me on Facebook. And if you have an opportunity to forward them the posts or to repost them for me, and just to spread the word that I'm out and engaging the world and bringing what I know to the public to help bring about transformation, I would really appreciate that. Any closing thoughts? I like the little smiley face with the P. You know that one? Well, I appreciate all of you joining me. And for those of you that I'll be talking with soon, I'm really looking forward to it. I really have to say that each time I touch a person's life, that I am instructed in how beautiful spirit is and just how valuable each and every one of you is in this world. So, thank you for trusting me as well to touch your life and to bring health and healing and well-being to you. I appreciate the faith that you trust in me, and I look forward to being here for you on your spiritual path. Blessings to all of you. And again, I will make this available via YouTube, and I will send out a link to all of you who have joined us this evening. Blessings to each and every one.